Well, good morning, friends. Jamie gave me a really easy task this morning. I got to talk about everybody's favorite subject. So we're continuing our series on habits that heal. And so this morning we're going to talk about a spiritual practice that I think honestly makes a lot of us kind of uneasy. It has a reputation for being joyless, right? Overly religious, and at least for making most of us a bit hangry when we try it. So we're talking about fasting. And so maybe you associate fasting with Lent, giving up coffee or chocolate or happiness for Jesus for about 40 days, except on Sunday, of course, right? Or maybe your exposure to fasting comes from like that podcast-loving coworker that you had that's like on a juice cleanse and really wants to talk to somebody about it. You're like, great. Or maybe you've just kind of avoided fasting entirely. Thinking like, isn't this something that we did before we invented brunch, right? We are kind of more brunch people, right? We like connection, we like community, we like comfort, and things that come with maple syrup and mimosas, all right? We're drawn to these practices that feel nourishing, not depriving, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But what if fasting, real Jesus-shaped fasting, isn't about deprivation at all? What if it's actually about nourishment, but a different form than we're used to? It's not about saying no to food or fun, but about saying yes to something deeper. So today I want to invite us to see fasting not as punishment or performance, but as preparation. Not to earn God's love, but to make space to receive it. Not to prove anything, but to make room for what matters most. Love, grace, connection, freedom. So before Jesus ever healed anyone or gathered any disciples, he went into the wilderness for 40 days and he fasted. So hear the word of the Lord from Matthew 4. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And he fasted 40 days and 40 nights. And afterwards he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Matthew, keen insight here. After he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. You think? But Jesus wasn't just hungry. He was becoming. As Dallas Willard and Jamie have told us, discipline is the human side of transformation. Jesus didn't fast to impress God. He fasted to align with God, to ground himself in his true identity. And I think if Jesus needed that spiritual rhythm, then how much more do we? Jesus cleared the clutter, the noise of ego and doubt and temptation so that he could hear what God was saying. You are the beloved. You don't have to prove that to anyone. And that's what wise spiritual practice does. It makes space for us to respond to God rather than react to everything else. Now, fasting is traditionally defined as abstaining from food, and that can be a really powerful practice when done wisely and safely. It's actually something that Jamie and I have found very meaningful throughout our lives together. And please understand that there are many different ways to fast from food safely. for those who do not have any health conditions or food-related conditions or disorders. Even skipping a single meal once a week or choosing to give up certain food luxuries can begin to make space in our lives for spiritual transformation. We start to see how much of our contentment is actually quite contingent on getting what we want. But food is not the only way that we can practice fasting in our modern world. There are all sorts of other ways that we fill ourselves up. Food might not actually be the thing that we most need to step away from. We also live in constant stimulation, binging on Netflix and social media and breaking news and inbox refreshes and Candy Crush, and the list goes on, right? And these little things, they give us these little dopamine hits that soothe us for a moment. They're actually they're coping strategies, but they don't satisfy. They're like spiritual junk food, and they keep us from sitting with what's real or what's in us that might actually need to heal. So maybe your fast is from busyness or noise, from unrelenting productivity, or from constant comparison. Maybe from being endlessly available. Or maybe from the shame that creeps up when you feel like you're not enough or you're not doing enough. Author and pastor John Ortberg calls this hurry sickness. And he once asked his spiritual mentor, Dallas Willard, how to live a spiritually healthy life. And this is what Willard told him. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. That phrase, ruthlessly eliminate hurry, that phrase is stuck with me. Because we live in a world where we kind of wear exhaustion as a badge of honor. And choosing slowness, choosing stillness, it can feel at least rebellious, if not sacrilegious. Have you ever turned your phone off for a little bit or just ran out of battery and felt like you had done something terribly wrong? Or left it at home and felt like you left your arm? Yeah. But this is what fasting does. It gives us permission. Permission to slow down, to breathe, and to listen. Fasting isn't about punishing ourselves for being bad or proving that we're good. It's about creating space for something far better to emerge. And when we do that, we learn. We learn what controls us. We learn what we are dependent on. We learn what we're addicted to. Franciscan teacher Richard Rohr talks about the false self. And the false self is not the bad self. It's just the part of us that is driven by fear and ego and comparison. It's the part of us that says, I am what I do, I am what others think of me, and I am what I have. What fasting can do is it helps quiet that voice and reconnect us with our true self, the self that knows who we are, that we are loved. I am the beloved. We have nothing to earn and nothing to prove. And yet, Rohr reminds us of an important truth when he writes, we do not think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. And this is what fasting can help us do. We don't try really hard to change our mind. We engage in a practice that makes change possible. So let me ask you, what might you fast from this next week? Not to prove yourself or punish yourself, but to make some space for God's love. As Jamie's mentioned, maybe it's social media. Maybe that would be a great church-wide practice for all of us. No posting, no scrolling, no opening it at all. Or do something really, really extreme. Turn your notifications off. Whoa. Could you imagine your pocket not buzzing for a full day? Or maybe it's vanity. Maybe we choose to wear the same 2 outfits for a whole week and don't do much in the way of hair and makeup. We don't do much to add to our appearance at all. Kind of a thought, huh? Or maybe it's the habit of saying yes to everything. Maybe you make a commitment to not adding a single new activity to your calendar over the next month. Or maybe it's TV and entertainment. Be bored. Like, I don't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, Dave. Yeah, I know, kind of crazy talk, right? Be bored. Or maybe it is food. Don't eat again after lunch until the next morning. And use that time that you would have been preparing food or eating food in prayer and silence. And notice what comes up for you. Or maybe it's fasting from hurry. Intentionally drive in the slow lane. Or get in the longest line at the grocery store. Without hating on the person in front of you. Or maybe refuse to Google it for a whole week. Just sit with not knowing the answer. Whoa. Ortberg says and encourages us that spiritual transformation isn't about trying harder, but training wisely. Fasting is a kind of training. And we can use these different practices to train ourselves. Not to win anything or to feel like we're becoming superhuman, but to become more aware and present to our life and the love that holds that whole life together. Barbara Brown Taylor, Jamie's theological crush, if you haven't noticed, writes, "The practice of being human, not superhuman, is what brings us into the presence of God." Fasting isn't about trying to overcome our humanity, but actually learning how to embrace it. And just as important as figuring out what we might fast from is, it's also important to think of what we might fast towards. Maybe we fast towards stillness. Or we fast towards gratitude. Or we fast towards compassion. Or we fast towards justice. Fasting can be a significant act of solidarity. When we fast from comforts, we remember those who don't choose hunger, who don't choose lack, who don't choose unemployment, but live with it daily. The poor, the marginalized, the war-torn, the forgotten. In Isaiah 58, God, speaking through the prophet, says this: "This is the kind of fast day I'm after, to break the chains of injustice, get rid of exploitation in the workplace, free the oppressed, cancel debts. What I'm interested in seeing you do is sharing your food with the hungry, inviting the homeless poor into your homes, putting clothes on the shivering ill-clad, being available to your own families." So true fasting, it opens us up, not just to God, but to our neighbors. So here's the thing. We don't fast in order to get better at fasting. That's not the point. And this is what I love about Jesus. Because after fasting comes the feast. When Jesus returned from the wilderness, he started healing and teaching and showing up at tables. He ate with friends and outcasts. He multiplied loaves and fishes, turned water into wine, grilled breakfast on the beach after the resurrection. The fast always leads to the feast. And not just any feast, but to a grace-filled one, a feast of welcome and freedom and abundance. So maybe spiritually, yes, we are more of a brunch people. But maybe what fasting can do is help clear the table to make room for something deeper. Not the sugar rush of people's approval or the overindulgence of compulsion, but the deep nourishment of knowing the unfathomable depths of God's love for us. So friends, what if fasting actually isn't about less at all? It's about having more. More clarity, more stillness, more space, more freedom, and more love. Not to prove you're worthy, but to remember you already are. So may we fast not to impress God, but to make space for God. Not to be more holy, but to be more whole. And may we trust that beyond the fast, there is always a feast. And the table is already set, already prepared. Freedom, grace, belonging, beloved. Amen.